Hey there, welcome to episode 20 of Killer POV. Wow.
My God, we've done 20 episodes?
We've done 20,
That's
yeah.
insane.
I am one of your co-hosts, Rob G. from FEARnet and Icons of Fright, and sitting with me is Rebekah McKendry from Fangoria.
Hello. Nobody interrupted. I feel really sad.
He's in the penalty box.
Aw.
And you know what? I'm going to actually introduce our guest before the interrupter.
Our guest, Mike Williamson.
We've got our favorite New Zealander back this week. We kind of missed you last week.
I was puking my guts out last week.
Yes,
that's hot.
no excuse to miss a show, but fine, I guess.
It was.
That could have
So you
made
must
for
have
good
seen Man of
listening.
Steel.
Yeah. I got CG.
You expect a lot of that tonight. So our special guest is a good friend of all of ours. Are we pausing?
No. I just couldn't hear myself.
Oh, okay.
You're figuring out if I am, in fact, a good friend of all of you.
Yeah.
No.
Actually,
He's
let's go around the room.
Nemesis.
I saw their confused faces and thought, wait a minute, maybe he's not a friend.
We don't like to address him as that. I call him a colleague or a cohort, but not really a friend. So.
No. Okay. No, it was
a stalker.
The pause was a sound issue. Now we're back. Our friend Mike Williamson is here. Hello Mike.
Hello.
Mike is
Who is Mike Williamson?
He's a fellow filmmaker, and he also curates and hosts the Secret 16 shows at your Jumpcut Cafe.
Oh, that Mike Williamson, yeah.
That's the same guy.
That's where
the guy in the room right now.
The guy standing in front of you.
That guy.
I love it.
Secret
Elric
16?
walked in and sat down and was like, "Oh, hey, Mike. So, who's our guest tonight?"
I just was expecting someone more famous.
Oh, come on.
What is Secret 16, Mike?
Secret 16 is a 16 millimeter screening that I do at Jumpcut Cafe of cult, horror, sci-fi films, feature films in 16 millimeter format. And we keep each title a secret from the audience until it rolls on screen. People can guess. We give out prizes. And it's really cool.
So does everyone just guess Monkey Shines for every film?
Yeah, pretty much.
And then they stay away.
That's what I thought. Yeah. But also, I mean, this kind of started, Mike is one of the few filmmakers I know in Los Angeles that actually is a big advocate of film and collects. Like he's got.
Believe that? How pathetic! I'm one of the few filmmakers you know in Los Angeles.
It's true though.
You're the only one I know that like has prints of stuff.
Joe Dante.
Besides, I don't know Joe Dante.
Joe, Quentin Tarantino. I mean,
I don't know these people. These are not actual friends.
Oh, okay.
That's what I meant. I mean, this is a real friend, a person that I see on a regular basis.
And our next guest, Joe Dante's guest is here now. Thanks, Rob.
But no, Mike is one of the few people I know that still collects 60 millimeter prints of films and shows them frequently in his backyard over the summer months, which is how I think I met you initially.
Yeah, maybe something like that.
I think before I lived here, I crashed one of your backyard screens.
Oh, yeah. Maybe with John Tarani or something.
Maybe, yeah.
I'm crashing a backyard screening.
Yeah, they're fun.
You were invited to one.
Do not message me through Facebook. My God.
But one
That
thing
whole
you will
confusing
learn,
thing.
which I just realized today, is that it's the same day as Viscera Film Festival.
Yeah.
Oh, no.
You know what?
He
I'm
hates women in
hosting
filmmaking.
Viscera. Why do you hate women?
He just hates horror women.
He just hates everybody. I do have to point out that Mike's planning, usually in screenings and backyard screenings in particular, is always like it always coincides with like 10 other things.
Well, that's Los Angeles, but none of them are as cool, and none of them certainly are as free.
Well, what are you showing next time?
Masters of the Universe.
Yeah,
the manliest of manly movies.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
That's my counter programming for Viscera. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Programming.
Wow.
Usually in the summer action months, girls get like a chick flick. I'm programming Masters of the Universe to contrast.
I would rather see Masters of the Universe than any chick flick.
But to further his pedigree, I think on Vimeo is In the Wall on Vimeo.
Yeah, In the Wall's up there. It's on FEARnet also, actually.
Oh yeah, that's true. And,
that's a really cool one.
And it's like a 25-minute, like it's a pretty short, but a really accomplished one, really fun movie, and won the Austin Fantastic
Won
Fest. Right?
Fantastic Fest and Scream Fest.
Cool.
And
you got some good genre names in there.
Misty Mundane.
Misty Monday's in there. Chris McKenna from King of the Ants and
Reanimator the musical.
Reanimator musical. Yeah. Clint Mansell to the score. Patty McCormack from The Bad Seed is in there.
Nice.
All right, so now we've proved that he's worth talking to. Now we can move on to the actual show.
Yeah.
What do you think? What we're watching?
What did we watch?
Actually, we held off on talking about a few things last week because Elric wasn't here.
Yeah, we didn't get to talk about The Conjuring.
There you go. And so you two saw The Conjuring, and me and Elric saw Adjust Your Tracking. Were you at Mike? Were you at that one?
No, I was on a plane. I tried to make it, but I couldn't make it.
All right. So hit us with the Conjuring first. Try to keep it spoiler free because I can't wait to see it.
Take my
So in the last shot, I will say that the last minute sucks.
when the ghost
I have to agree with that.
I would say it's a movie that's 99 minutes, masterpiece, like modern, and then 1 minute.
Are you being
of
serious?
Sucks. Yeah, for real.
was the ghost laying dead
just
on the
kind of
floor the whole movie.
Yeah, but it's like the epilogue, I'll call it. Like you've had your climax and everything. It's not like Last Exorcism where I'm always turn it off before it gets to the climax.
And it doesn't matter at all. It doesn't matter. It's just a bummer that it wasn't completely perfect. It's definitely. Look, I just spent the night a couple nights ago looking at doing all the haunted. I got home at 11 p.m. and I had to write a list for Becca for haunted house movies. So I was looking at all of them, and I didn't put it on the list. But in all honesty, of top 10 all-time haunted house, it'd probably be in the top 3 or 4.
Yeah,
wow.
I would definitely say that.
And it just came out now.
Is it comparable with any other
Yeah,
haunted
it's
house
got
ones?
a lot in common with The Haunting and Amityville. Somewhere in between the two of those films.
But it was scarier than both for me. And I do have to agree with Elric. I think that little tag on the end, I think I would refer to that as the denouement.
Yeah, I call it the John dies at the end.
Yeah.
Love the film ending. Oh, you just took all the
You
air
just
out
did
of the
that.
movie.
So, yeah,
and it was
it's
on
that.
the credits, no less. But no, look, I think James Wan's one of the nicest people I've met since moving to LA, but I have never really thought he was a great director. I thought Insidious was really cool. Every other film I'm not a big fan of.
Really?
In the direction specifically. Especially I look at someone and go, it's a complete mess, doesn't know how to work with actors at all, even though the story's awesome. And this film was so competently directed. It was masterful.
It was gorgeous.
And
the
camera,
scares were perfect. And it was what I wanted Insidious to be, because I really liked Insidious all the way up to the climax. And then I was like, really, you're going to set it in a black room with, a fog machine? That's your climactic set?
That was awesome.
I like that.
I like that.
I did like it.
I had issues. But anyway, it just kept it going through up until the credits. But
and it's a studio film. It feels like a classic studio film. Mike often, will say, "Oh, Iron Man and all the CG," and I totally feel the same way. Where you just check out.
Yeah.
This film felt like the total opposite. It felt like, oh, this guy got to play with the bigger toys, and he went for a throwback.
Yeah.
And he went mostly practical. He went just everything about it feels like a big scale. I don't know. It was super fun.
And it scared. I mean,
it was genuine scary.
In
a lot
the
of people
little
were
row
jumping.
that we were sitting, it was me and Elric, Dave, Mike Mendez, Dave Parker. And
who was jumping out of the
Dave
seat.
Parker was sitting next to me and he screamed at least 3 times. And so did I. But I mean, he was shielding his, so was I. So we shielded our eyes.
It's just, and I think it's really exciting. My only concern is that it doesn't do well. It's you want this movie to do well.
I think this will do amazingly well.
It's all promotion. It's all,
There's no other really good horror films coming out.
Yeah, it's got a good buzz. I mean, no competition this month, really, in terms of horror.
I hope so.
I can't wait to see it.
I did see a trailer for it. I was sitting in the counter having a burger at lunch today, and I saw it playing on the television. So.
Yeah, I'd say watch as little as possible.
It's a trailer for Conjuring and Insidious 2 back to back.
Wow.
The Purge.
Yeah, you see
this
this
filmmaker.
I'll tell you what, this triggered in me though.
Blumhouse lineup.
Watching The Conjuring made me realize that this might be the best year in horror in 10 or 20 years because and there's a lot of crap too, but thinking about Maniac, The Conjuring, Evil Dead remake, depending on what side of the fence you are, I'm on the side that thought it was a really fun, badass remake.
I was too.
Stoker, which isn't quite a horror film, but it's the best, one of my favorite films of the year. These are usually come one of those you get a year.
Yeah, that's the first
you're
time.
getting back to back.
We're only in July,
and your next hasn't hit.
Yeah, that's true. Your next hasn't come out.
And I haven't seen The Purge, even though it's not necessarily a great film, but it did great.
The only
business.
guy that liked The Purge. I liked The Purge.
I got to see it.
I want to see it.
Yeah, I have to see it.
But this is great. This is great.
It's a good year for the genre.
And even the studio film World War Z seems like most genre fans are kind of saying, it's a studio film, but it's not bad.
Yeah.
It's not like the normal studio film.
I haven't seen it.
Watch away hating
Mike saw it today. And what'd you think?
I thought it was solid. I thought it's way better than I anticipated it being. Just from the trailers, it looked like it was going to be CGI fest and just ridiculous. I mean, that scene with them all climbing up the wall looked like lemmings from Atari.
They used orc technology.
But it's totally solid. It's well done. It's suspenseful. It doesn't really bring anything new to the table as far as I'm concerned, other than I guess a budget. But it's still your typical modern, virus infects people and they go crazy and they run and they bite people and you have a movie star trying to solve it. It doesn't really bring anything new to the table.
We just never seen anything at this scale, essentially, in a zombie movie at least.
Yeah,
right?
but I don't know though.
Does it feel bigger than 28 weeks later?
See, this is the thing with, do we want scale in horror pictures?
I don't think so,
you know
yeah.
what I mean? Is that
no,
impressive?
not exactly, but I still think that the opening of the Dawn of the Dead remake, the first 15 minutes is one of the best openings to a movie ever. And what I loved about it is that there's an aerial shot where you see the cars crashing while she's trying to get away, and you kind of just get a sense of the chaos. Mm-hmm. And in the preview footage I saw World War Z, it seemed like a lot of that, where it's like,
well,
you pull back even further,
but
it's
some of that, with modern technology, there was an aerial shot, and it's supposed to be really impressive with all of these, hundreds of thousands of zombies swarming, and I'm giggling at it because it looks like, it looks like digital ants running everywhere, and it's like, oh, look at how cute, look at all that. But so that kind of thing, what's interesting about it is it does start really big. And it gets smaller as it goes along. The climax, I know it's probably disappointing for a lot of people. It gets, it's a pretty muted, and it's a muted happy ending. It just gets pretty small. But so
it's already been greenlit, right, for a sequel, even though
it
was a budgetary.
It's
crazy.
Clearly set up for that. It's sort of a vague, we won the battle, but not the war kind of.
Yeah. Well, they barely touched from what I understand, they barely even scratched the surface on what's in the book.
Yeah, I had read a script for World War Z a long time ago, maybe 5 years ago, and it was. I hadn't read the book, still haven't read the book, but that script was more like the book. Nothing like what I saw today. It was, told from, it was storytelling, people telling their stories like the book is.
And one's from the zombie perspective, I heard somebody say about the book.
Oh, really?
There's one of the stories is from the zombie's perspective. Yeah,
I just picked up the book. So one of my friends that's a huge fan. Actually, Scott Reynolds, who was in 2 weeks ago, he read the book and loved it, and saw the movie and loved it, and said it's a way cooler experience having both. Because it's you get to see a movie, but then everything else that's going on in the background if you've read the book.
Like a backstory.
So he said that they kind of complement each other in that way.
Yeah,
they're not the same thing. But
it was good. It was totally solid. It was, to me, it was like a B. Solid, enjoyable, good suspense. Just was, it was like you've seen this sort of thing, especially with modern zombies before. It's not really outside the box from anything. 28 Days, any of that kind of stuff.
And you gave Superman an A, right?
That was an F. An F.
But the question is, if we're having this banner year of horror where we're seeing all these really top films come out, both from studios and the indies, what's the new trend? What's going to emerge as the new trend? Because we had torture films, we had zombie films. I think that zombie films are going to wane out pretty quickly.
Have you noticed
now.
that there's no... Actually, sorry, I forgot one of the other best films of this year, VHS 2, which really took a huge leap.
I think that's your trend, actually, is it's not thematic, it's budgetary, where small budget movies are getting wide theatrical releases. And I think it probably dates back... I think you probably pinpoint it with Paranormal. That was the first. That's kind of where Blumhouse, started doing all this kind of stuff. And I think that micro budget, breaking 50 million, breaking 70 million, like what is Purge at? It's like at 50 million, maybe
something
plus.
Like that. But that's after the Paranormal is when these companies actually set up distribution models where we're looking to make these movies.
Sure. Insidious. Right. What was Insidious? Like $1 million
just
movie?
Under $1 million, 900. Yeah.
So that's kind of the trend to me, is figure out how to make a movie for $1 million that is marketable to masses. And
I feel like horror films should never be over 2. We've talked about it a lot here. I feel like the gloss and everything just ruins horror films.
Well, that's why World War Z, when you say it brings a scale to, it's like like the scale in Day of the Dead is in the back of your mind. It doesn't really affect the trappings of claustrophobia or anything like that. When you get way out in the open, your big aerial shots, you start. To me, then it becomes spectacle. It's not particularly
dissipates that.
Well, that's all I think of. It's summer spectacle at this point. I don't think of World War Z as like, oh my god, it's going to be this great zombie epic. No, it's just a summer popcorn spectacle.
When I was watching it, it's similar to something like Aliens, where it kind of takes a horror trapping, but it exploits in an action sort of universe, and it makes it bigger and bolder and not better.
Right.
I'm not particularly an Aliens fan, but it's that sort of movie where you go, no, I'm an Alien guy, but it's Yeah, that sort of thing where it takes horror trappings and exploits it to an action audience, kind of.
As an Alien versus Predator fan,
I liked AVPR.
I
liked Alien 3. Alien 3 I like.
Those are kind of like
3 more than Aliens.
Those are like frosting for me with no cake, where I can just, they're sugary sweet and they have nothing to them. I just love them.
I'm a frosting guy.
So that's The Conjuring.
No, that was what he saw.
Big circles back there. But yes, I highly recommend The Conjuring to
people are
everybody.
People are going to dig it, and it's just good. It's cool to see a film that you go, 20 years from now, somebody will go, we'll put that on one of those classic lists.
Yeah.
I think that's awesome.
I really wish they could have gotten it down below to a PG-13, because I think that would have really helped it.
Yeah.
But I mean, it is. I can see why they rated it R. I mean, it's scary as hell. If I had watched that when I was, a kid, that would have really messed me up. I still would have loved it, but I would have watched
the ads should just say, with the dude from Office Space, Ron Livingston is. Now, he's the only one who's a little wasted in it. He doesn't get to do much. He's kind of a very straight character. Never gets any kind of humor, which I think for an actor like that maybe a little hard.
Yeah.
He's the only one I felt was a little wasted. Everyone else, and the main thing that this film does, which is very important, is it makes up for Lily Taylor's absolutely blasphemous remake of The Haunting.
Yeah.
Which is one of the worst and the perfect example of CGI ruining movies.
I never even watched the whole thing. I'm a big
awful
Robert Wise.
Not that bad.
Oh my god! Yeah, it's one of the worst horror films in the history of cinema.
It's not that bad.
It is one of the worst. It is like going into a theme ride, but you don't get to ride the theme. You're just sitting there and it's happening around you.
You're just ticked that it wasn't like the original.
No, because Robert Wise was an editor and he knew how to do things.
Owen Wilson kind of sucked in it, but
was Owen Wilson in that? My God,
wasn't he?
Liam Neeson. I remember.
Owen Wilson.
Yeah, Owen
Captain
Wilson was
Zeta
in it.
Jones.
It was all just flash, man. It was none of the tension of the original.
Was The Innocents on your list of?
It wasn't this time because it's an endless. I went for like kind of personal things that actually creeped me out.
What was on your list?
The Entity.
I love
it's one of my top.
I have a
the
print
Sentinel.
of that.
Yeah, see, he has a print of that.
I had a print of that.
I'm not allowed to tell because I
he
don't
isn't.
know. It might
This
get
is
published.
for Fangoria is doing a haunted house issue that releases in August. And it is, we picked like the top 19 or 20 haunts across America. And
These were
we
Fangoria spoilers that we just did.
Yeah, well, you may lose.
Teasers.
You may discuss 2 of them. And so we cover these different haunted houses across America that we really like, put in pictures. I wrote a ridiculously long little like timeline of the history of haunted houses, going all the way back to like Greco-Roman times through modern day. And we had Elric list his top 15 or it's top 10.
Top 10 creepy haunted house films, and then I did 3 that are just so crazy that you have to watch them. They're just so weird. And those 3 are really interesting. Because originally they had asked me to do the top 10 maybe obscure.
Yeah.
And then then it changed, so I had to pivot. But I like the personal films, and they're often not always the main list ones,
Yeah.
I mean, The Haunting's always going to be, those kind of movies are always in there because
But
they're incredible.
the original school, the remake was not bad.
Jan de Bont. True story. When I first moved to LA, I was at a urinal. And a drunk guy came up to me and goes, "You're an actor?" I think he was hitting on me at a urinal, and he's like, "You're an actor? You look like an actor." I worked for Jan de Bont once, and if Jan de Bont says, "Find me a missile silo," you know what you do? You find him a missile silo. And then I looked and went, "Cool," and I walked away.
So he's looking down at your junk saying he's finding a missile.
For Jan de Bont. I'll never forget it.
David Lynch wrote this scene, didn't he? Wow.
It's a true story. It's based on a true story.
I'm going to remake it.
Okay, so The Conjuring is thumbs up.
Yes.
2 thumbs up.
So
And then
I
Elric
completely missed the VHS documentary because I have a child now, and
Yes.
Dave and I have to flip-flop who gets to go out each night. So that was not my night to go out. So I missed it, and I was really sad. So tell me what happened.
I liked it a lot.
lot
We
of
saw Elric did a screening at Jumpcut of a documentary called "Adjust Your Tracking."
Please adjust your tracking.
Please adjust your tracking.
It's polite.
All right. The full
Yeah,
thing.
some guy, I saw the trailer for it online. I wrote to a guy in Indiana. I said, "Hey, is this coming out anytime soon?" He said, "We're kind of touring it." I said, "Can I show it for free?" And he said, "Yeah."
Yeah,
And I didn't know
because this
if
is like
anyone would
one
come.
of 2 or 3 VHS docs that are currently in production.
Rewind this or
Rewind this
something.
is the other one, but I mean, they all have something to them that are interesting.
You can make a million. I mean, what we learned from This one is you could make $1 million as long as you get the right fans.
The right people in it, yeah.
It wasn't a big star folk. It wasn't just that, like, let's get everyone famous talking about VHS. It was really fun and personable and idiosyncratic and some bizarre characters and new titles I hadn't heard of. And
Yeah.
it was probably the most laughter we've had.
At a screening. Yeah, it was cool. Yeah,
it was really funny.
Yeah, it was
because I mean, they go through a very brief history of just like VHS, like, you know, when it first came out, and we get to see a lot of like vintage commercials and stuff. Like, cool. You know, and then like, but they go through the whole thing pretty fast.
When it comes out of the water, suddenly a VHS player and a guy holding it comes out of the pool. And you're like, that wouldn't work.
Yeah, they were wild. They were wild. And then like, you know, digital video disc, and then like DVD, how like totally demolish it. And then you get to like interview like, you know, I don't know, like 6 or 7 dudes that are just all like, that will not let go of VHS. One of them being our dear friend Phil Blankenship, who is great in it. Yeah,
he has a funny story, a couple funny. But yeah, some guy. What was the biggest collection? Was like 100.
Well, there was one dude that didn't you say that he had like at one point he counted over 20,000 or something like
20,000.
Oh my god!
But you know, it's a lot of personal stories. It's a lot of people talking about why it's so. I mean, for a lot of us, and we can relate to this. It's like the first time we saw a lot of those movies was that way.
Yeah.
So, you know, which I'm sure is a lot of the reason that Mike collects prints and film is because you remember probably seeing a lot of those films that way.
Well, yeah, just the aesthetic of film. I mean, not really on 16 millimeter, you know, as much, but just the aesthetic of film is how I kind of feel like I haven't seen a movie unless I've seen it on film.
Right. Yeah. So I mean, these people were making the point about how VHS is more than just the nostalgia of collecting it. And plus it's super cheap nowadays. I mean, the doc made me want to run sometimes. Sometimes it's what's that rare movie? The Tales of the Quad something?
Quad Zone? Quad Zone.
Tales of the Quad Zone.
By the guy who made Black Devil Doll.
Yeah.
The film he made before was called Tales from the Quad Zone, I believe. And
is this the original Black Devil Doll?
Yeah. Which I know that's not the title because that was a trivia question that I got wrong.
I think it was, what was it called? The Curse of the Black Devil Doll? Or
but this guy's
like
a really
that.
terrible film. I mean, the films look just god-awful, but it's one of those ones that's just so rare.
It's so rare that it's one of the most sought after and expensive VHSs. Like somebody, I think it was Eric Spudik sold his for like $600.
He was one of the first people I met when I moved to LA was Spudik at
he's
Spudik
a character.
Empire.
Yeah.
And then me and him were in camel spiders together for the whole day just shooting these guns. And so seeing on, and he was telling me, he got one on eBay. No, he went into a store and found one for like $3.
$3 and sold it for $600 on eBay.
On eBay.
It's like one of the
bidding war.
You know? Now I had one of those because Shock 'Em Dead is this like rare horror movie from the 80s that actually Elijah told me about, Elijah Drenner. And I was in the Glendale Goodwill one day and I found it. And I was like, what are the odds of finding this? And I was like, I'm keeping this copy. And then like a month later, I was in the Goodwill, because I love Goodwills. I was in the Goodwill in Sherman Oaks and I found another copy. And I was like, oh man, this is crazy.
Marnie's mama is so poor. But no, one thing is that's funny about this film is you'll know now why you don't come across those things very often at Goodwill stores and closed video stores, because these people are like diligent. They're calling every store.
I mean, some of the stories are fantastic, and I don't want to spoil too many, but like there was one, and I'll butcher it, so I'll just give the very basic. But Phil tells a story about how he's like, there's this one tape that he found once, and he's like, it's as if like these metalhead dudes pissed on a tape for 40 years straight every day.
Oh, the smell of it.
Then rubbed it in their butts, then rubbed it on their beards, and it was just waiting for me to buy it. So there's like a dozen stories like that make it really entertaining. And it made me want to run to Amoeba and look and like comb through their dollar videotapes. Because I recognized half of those dudes from when I worked at Amoeba. Yeah. And I was like, oh yeah, I know that guy.
But it was definitely a East Coast band. Like there weren't that many of our West Coast types who could have been that if it was made by a West Coast person. It was very clearly someone who's East Coast bound. Yeah. And that so you could make the same film out here, and I'm sure it would be awesome.
Well, maybe Juan, this is probably going to be more like that.
You could just make a cinephilia movie about cinephilia. You could go beyond just videotapes and make it about film like what we're doing tonight. But it's really fun, and I hope people can see. I don't know how it's going to come out. Maybe it'll be online.
You could find the Facebook, and they're just doing screenings now. But I'm sure it's inevitably going to come out. And it's a lot of fun.
And if you're in this room, I'll give you the screener.
Oh yeah,
I would love to see it.
That's how easy
that was.
Since
we missed it.
If you're one of the four of us.
I also saw a film. I hope I don't butcher the pronunciation. American Mary.
my.
I watched it on video last week.
We had conversations about this beforehand, about the marketing of it and everything, so I have to know. And you knew what I thought about it.
Screw me over because she wouldn't lend me the screener. Actually, you know what?
No, I had sent the screener to Sam Zimmerman in New York, so I no longer had it anymore.
I felt, like it did similar things to as Excision did. I actually liked it more than Excision. But it didn't feel like a horror. It didn't really feel like a horror film so much. It had a few horror scenes. It felt more like an indie drama it had a really good lead. That was the thing I walked away with. I think the lead was great. She's from Ginger Snaps.
Yeah, I think Catherine Isabelle.
I think she's really great. I think that was the best thing about the film. I think it was a good, solid first film. I find the filmmakers completely obnoxious, and I'm not as real people because I don't know you at all. If you're listening, Saskatchewan,
they're very sweet. I have to say, they're very sweet.
But when you talk in unison and you go, "Oh my God, we're the Saskatchewan," it's like I want to just walk away from your product. And yet I watched your movie and went, "This was a thoughtful piece of filmmaking. There's no way that's who you really are. So stop doing that, and I'll probably take you more seriously."
Did the ending bother you?
I can't really remember.
I rather like the ending if it's
really?
Yeah.
Off camera, you have to remind me because I've totally.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like a year ago.
That was the only thing that bothered me. I was like, I loved the movie, and the whole time I was like, "Yes, go girls, go!" And then the ending came up, and it was kind of a punch out ending for me.
Oh.
So
you're not talking about the special thanks to Eli Roth part because that's I thought
that's a little awkward, but no, I was talking about the actual ending was the only thing that I was kind of like, but the film was good enough that I can live with the ending.
I would say if it didn't have that great a lead, it would have been a short film. Like the plot of that could have been a great 20-minute award-winning kind of short.
Yeah,
it really tight. But with her performance, it elevated it, and made it a watchable, fun indie. Like I thought it was cool. I was surprised. I was expecting to really not be my thing.
Right.
I thought it'd be a lot more gory, grisly torture porn than it was, and the torture scenes were not very often. So,
did you see anything else? I burned through a couple of movies this week.
I saw a little film that the people who were there, all 5 of them who showed up, called The Attic.
This is the most recent Secret 16.
Yes, the most recent 16.
There was more than 5 people, right?
No, it was very lowly attended.
Really?
There were 7. 7 showed
people.
up.
There was a lot going on that night.
Yeah.
7 people were there to watch The Attic. It has.
I never heard of it.
No, I hadn't either.
It has a scene where a librarian is being attacked by flaming books that are possessed by Argento lighting.
And she has these great
and
dark
it's a flashback.
Wow, it's like Ghostbusters if the opening scene had continued for a little bit.
Yeah. It isn't a great film, but it has a great flashback.
There's a lot of great stuff.
There's some fun moments and some a fun Ray Milland performance. It's just a strange movie. It's very straight. It moves very straight in the kind of weird way.
Yeah.
It's an odd duck.
Yeah, it's
and I
really
never would have
bizarre.
seen it. And I mean, no one's heard of this thing. This thing
I know
is
you guys
obscure.
challenged the audience for anybody who could see it would get a free cookie.
True story. Before the screening, true story.
No.
Before the screening, I promised
It's true.
somebody. I was so sure they hadn't seen it. They were like, "Oh, I might have seen it." I said, "I will give you the deed to Jumpcut."
You did.
and I shook on it.
He did. I
shook on it because I was that sure.
Wow.
And I still got the place picture. So stuck on that.
This is what's actually been fun for me about film collecting is I'll watch movies on film that I know I would never watch otherwise. Like The Attic is something that I hadn't heard. It's not terribly obscure. It has Carrie Snodgrass and Ray Milland, and it had a theatrical release, but it just wasn't on my radar at all. Have you guys even heard of it?
No, never heard of it.
Never heard of it.
So, if I'd seen it on Netflix, I would have put it in the queue and never watched it, But because I was offered a print of it and I bought it, I watched it and it's like, oh, I never in a million years would have seen this movie otherwise.
Before you buy it, though, what's the process? You see the title and go, what's that? And then you look it up on IMDb.
That was very an odd purchase because it was so cheap. The person was selling films and they didn't know what anything was worth. And I got it for $25. I got for the price of a DVD. I got a 16 print of it. So I was like, why not? It's clearly a horror movie. Well, I thought it was a horror movie. It's advertised as a horror movie when you watch the trailer. It's not really a horror movie. It's but
enough that you aren't feeling ripped off that you didn't.
Yeah,
enough.
There's some murders.
Yeah,
and a monkey.
And a monkey.
Dressed in a sailor suit.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Who's bought at a pet store for $150, as we all have bought our monkeys.
In Wichita.
Oh, that's where you get your monkeys. They have so many monkeys in Wichita. Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So there have been plenty of movies that I've been exposed to that I probably wouldn't have been just because I'm a film collector. Just, I buy a collection and this is in there and I'll watch it. And oh, wow, I never would have bothered had it been on Netflix.
Is that as competitive a world as what we were just talking about with the VHS thing? Like, are there people out there, like a Halloween print comes up on eBay and everyone clamors to get it, drives up the price?
Definitely, and the prices are infinitely more expensive than VHS movies and stuff like that. It's certainly
What's a high end price for a 16 millimeter? Like for something that everyone wants, a pristine print of something.
Well, you could easily spend $1,000 on you could easily spend $1,000 on a solid print of a hard to find movie that's well respected, something like that. Usually they're more in the $300, $400, $500 range. But there's prints that have gone for $5,000, stuff like that.
What's the best deal you ever got? Like on a print you think's awesome, but it was also a cheap deal.
I got an original scope, a low fade print of the original version of Empire Strikes Back for $0.
Oh
wow! How'd you score it?
Was this part of that school?
It wasn't a school. It was I really can't even say. There were prints.
You stole it.
I didn't steal it, but there were prints that were going to be destroyed, and rather than be destroyed, someone knew I was a film collector, and they let me take my pick. And
one
that was
slid out of the building.
One slid out of the building, and that was it.
And they were the original version. It was the original version of Empire.
40 slipped out of the building, really.
Wow.
But, yeah. That's the original version.
Impressive.
That's
awesome.
Unseen by me before in 16mm collecting at all. That there's a lot of bootlegs of that, People back in the 80s would get a 35mm print from a theater and bootleg it to 16. It would have all the printed in splices and stuff that it doesn't look very good.
Right.
There's Empire prints like that. But this is an original made from negatives with the studio. It looks incredible. You were there for that.
Yeah, it was great.
You've got to tell them about the Halloween H2O print that we.
Oh yeah.
Explain how it happened too, because I don't fully get the framing.
Well, I screened a Halloween H2O print, which was shot Super 35 with the intention of being cropped. So Super 35 extends the camera negative into where the soundtrack would be. So it's a wider 35mm ratio that some people then crop down on the top and bottom to make it scope in theaters. There've been a bunch of movies like that starting in, I guess, the late 70s or something like that. It's kind of when they started doing Super 35 in lieu of shooting scope with a scope lens, which looks way better, but it's harder. It takes more light. So Halloween H2O was shot basically in sort of like a 1:3:3 ratio and cropped down for scope in theaters. And when they make a scope print of it in 35mm, it's true scope. They go through an optical process, and this is kind of ridiculous to try and explain to you guys, but basically you wouldn't see that extra negative, in a 30, but for the 16 prints, instead of taking that cropped scope image and fixing it up for 16, they just left the whole damn camera negative. So there's a ton more info on the top and bottom of the frame that you see on the 16mm print than anywhere else. So you can't see it like this. Like if you had a 35 print, it doesn't look like this. So you see boom mics and crew members and dolly tracks and open ceilings of the stage and all kinds of stuff throughout the whole movie.
At the most intimate moment, you'll have somebody, the most intimate moment, they're
between
kissing
Josh Hartnett and Jamie Lee Curtis, and then you'll see a crew member up top
big fuzzy
holding a boom over them.
But the best is you see the hand come in and then a door slam. So it's meant to be a door slam scare, but you actually see the hand.
Crew member.
And it's amazing. And it actually I don't know, it tells you something about horror filmmaking. It's almost like that funny.
Well, it's not just horror filmmaking, it's movie magic in general, how simplistic it can be and how it really is what's in the frame is what matters, and what's outside of the frame, even by a few inches, can totally destroy that mystery.
I think Scorsese has a quote like that. It doesn't matter. Anything outside the frame, who gives a shit? It's just what's in that frame. That's all that ever matters.
And then when you start showing things right outside the frame, then it's
ridiculous.
You're pulled out of the movie.
Yeah, I was never in that film. I mean, I've seen it years ago.
I was going to say, H2O is not really engaging.
There's stuff there's stuff like 35, regular 35 in theaters. It's a taller image that you see too, and they just crop it down in the booth. They just put a little mat over the top and bottom. But there's stuff that we've seen growing up where a lot of people think, I thought it too. When DVDs came out, you're like, oh wow, it's widescreen. I'm finally seeing more on the sides.
Is it still like panned and scanned to a degree?
No, but what would happen, like on VHS tapes and stuff, we all thought, oh, it's 1 through 3. I'm missing the sides, but really they're opening up the tops and bottoms. So, there's stuff that we've seen that we like. I clearly remember Pee-wee's Big Adventure.
I was going to bring that up. Seriously, you could see the chains.
That's all.
I thought that was all intentional.
It's not intentional, but because it's not a pan and scan, they just open the top and bottom. You're seeing outside of the frame what was intended, and then that becomes part of our lexicon of Pee-wee's Big Adventure. You're like,
that's the way we remember it.
It's so kooky. There's that scene where the chain keeps going through the bike, and you see it. It's hilarious, but it's not supposed to be like that, And there's the car, signs coming toward you. See they're on a track. With
that's so funny.
Tim Burton's a genius. He's like, breaking the fourth wall. It's like, no, it's just because
it was never meant to be. Pee-wee's. That was the one movie I remember because
I remember seeing that when I was a kid.
Many times.
Yeah,
and then you get the DVD and you're like, wait a minute, that wasn't supposed to be there.
The change was so there.
Hilarious.
They fixed it. But going back a second, the importance of the Halloween H2O thing is that you've had this print forever, and our good friend Brian Collins was the one that has been bugging Mike for years to show it.
Yeah, so 16 prints were generally screened like colleges, cruise ships and stuff, and Brian saw Halloween H2O for the first time at his college, and they screened it in a 16mm print. So that was his first way of seeing H2O.
That's what's blown his mind.
All these boom mics and stuff. And, he's thinking they're projecting it wrong, and they're really not. It's just how the 16 prints were. Were I to screen it normally, I would crop it in my projector too, so it wasn't so egregious.
Yeah.
But he
for him
really
to
wanted to relive it. He wanted to relive this experience of how Halloween H2O was to him.
I think the only movie I saw like that with lots of booms, like lots, like to the point where it had to have been that issue was 187 with Sam Jackson as a school, and it would be like every 5 minutes a boom was, and I was like, oh my god,
in the
this
theater
guy
you saw it that way.
Yeah, and I was like, this guy can't know how to. This was in New Zealand though, where everything's probably
Yeah, so it's
I was going to say I've seen that movie and I do not recall any. I don't recall it being good, but I don't recall any.
It wasn't that great.
That's probably a projectionist issue.
Well, the other story I wanted to bring up was because we had Brian on the show back for episode, I think it was 11, where we were talking slashers, and we talked about Disconnected. Which was in fact a secret 16, and one that we just couldn't believe. But
which I had to go buy a copy of because I missed it. I was so upset.
I got a VHS of it too.
Yeah.
But I think you are responsible,
Secret 16
Mike, for
is changing lives.
Yeah. Changing lives. Whoa.
7 lives have been changed by the addict.
But yeah, if you could tell us the story of how you found that film, because that must have been just mind-blowing too.
It was, and that's a perfect example of a movie I would never have seen had it not been for film collecting. There was a screening at the Echo Park Film Center in Echo Park, and they there's a film collector that does screenings there every now and then of oddities and stuff. And
had you ever heard of it, or it was just like
the movie?
Yeah,
no, it was I saw him on the Echo Park Film Center's website or something, an 80s slasher is what they call it. It said Disconnected, and I thought, I've never seen that, and it's on film. I'll go see that. It's one of those things where I'm never going to really, if I see it in Netflix amidst 50,000 other, bad B movies, I'm never going to watch it. And I called Brian because he was doing horror movie a day, and I thought, well, this is one I'm sure he's not reviewed. So we went to the Echo Park Film Center to see it, and it was just like, it was one of those experiences where you're beside yourself. It's such a bizarre.
Were there a lot of people at the screening, or?
Probably like 25. It's similar size to Jumpcut. It's like that kind of thing. Where it's
inferior.
A micro cinema.
They don't have the hot chicken.
But it was indescribable. We were just on the floor laughing the whole time, and it's not a bad movie in the sense that there is some laughing at it, but there is some. You're trying to decipher this movie. You're trying to get inside the filmmaker's head. Like, what is the intention of this shot? How did he come to this decision? Because it's not just inept. It's inept with like purpose. It's inept with artistic ambition. And it's like, wow, I don't really understand, what he's communicating. There's no right and wrong in cinema, but there is kind of a right and wrong in cinema. Just like the English language works from beginning to end to make a sentence that you understand. When you start jumbling up all those words, you're like, well, it's not really English, you know. It looks like a movie, it sounds like a movie, but it's not really a movie. It's like it's not really.
But your brain struggles to try to piece it together as some type of sensical. It's very. I don't want to compare him to David Lynch, but your brain's kind of doing the same thing where you're struggling to make it into a plot. But
Right,
it doesn't
exactly.
really happen.
I always think with Lynch is though your brain doesn't even bother. You just go with it because he's so good at it.
Yeah.
This guy's not good at it in a sense, so your brain is having to work.
Yeah,
that's why it's confusing.
My brain was screaming through most of it, so it's pretty intense.
A David Lynch movie is, you know, dreamlike on purpose.
Yeah.
And this seemed dreamlike on accident. You know, it's like,
See, but
so incoherent it becomes this nightmare.
But but once you saw it at that
to have
screening,
it.
you became obsessed with buying it.
I became obsessed.
So did you buy that print?
That's the only print.
Really?
Yeah.
So how did that happen? You talked to the guy after?
I talked to the guy after. He was local, and eventually we worked out a trade. And it became mine forever. You know,
I want to hear more about the trade. Let's just brush over. What did you have to give up?
Okay, well,
for this to be yours.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, it was actually a good trade in my favor. I think Dawn of the Dead is really sought after in 60mm collecting world for a couple reasons. A, it's a classic movie, but B, all the 16mm prints were the director's cut, the longer version. The 35 prints are the shorter theatrical version, and I had a print of that, and that's worth a lot of money, but. It's pink. It was faded, and I don't really collect faded prints. So I traded. He wanted Dawn of the Dead. I traded him that for a disconnected and a scope original low fade print of John Carpenter's The Thing.
You got The Thing?
I've got The Thing.
Wow.
And disconnected for Dawn of the Dead.
Disconnected for Dawn of the Dead.
For a faded
Even
Dawn of the
Romero
Dead.
would have made that. I'd like to think that. Anyway.
So that was
cool.
that.
That's cool. You did well.
Yeah, I did well on that one.
Yeah.
That was a good one.
Have you ever gotten totally screwed on a trade? You don't have to tell us about it, but do you think anyone ever got the better?
No, not really.
I guess it's a personal thing, right? The films, if you're in love with it, say you love The Burbs, you're willing to trade something that's better than The Burbs, better and
not much is better than
No.
The Burbs.
Mr. Mom,
Mr. Mom,
Better Off Dead. They're all on the same level.
He's got a Better Off Dead, right?
I do have a Better Off Dead.
do you have a Mr. Mom?
No, I don't.
That's cool.
What would you consider? I don't know, off the top of your head, what are your top 5 prints that you own? Your 5 favorite movies that you have prints of?
I'm really proud of my Technicolor print of Rosemary's Baby. That's really rare.
I want to see that.
Yeah. All my Bava stuff. I got a Technicolor Blood and Black Lace.
Oh, that's one of the most gorgeous films ever.
Yeah, it's awesome. The Technicolor on that, it blows your mind. Hatchet for the Honeymoon. I have. Gremlins is my favorite movie of all time, so I'm really glad I have a print of Gremlins. But yeah, the Technicolor stuff in my collection. I've got some Freddie Francis stuff, like a Technicolor The Skull, which is a really cool movie. Have you guys seen The Skull? It's pretty incredible.
Let the bees out now.
Deadly Bees. Another Freddie Francis
Another
movie
Freddie
I have.
Francis
It's not
we
as
saw.
good as The Skull,
Not as
but
good.
but it's really fun.
Beautiful print.
I have not seen The Beast.
It was a great print, but it's a little stodgy, the film.
Yeah, but that's okay.
That's all right. Yeah. That was fun. I'd love to see Blood and Black Lace. We should do that one.
Yeah, why don't we done a screening of that?
No.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's a secret.
It's a secret at 16.
Let's backpedal. Did either of you guys, we'll keep tying in this conversation, but did either of you see anything that was particularly important this week? We're kind of mixing the whole...
Yeah, not as fun as talking about film, though.
Yeah.
I saw World War Z in 35mm at the only multiplex in Los Angeles still running 35mm.
Which is?
Which one?
The Glendale Galaxy.
Okay.
And I'm sure it's just because they're running out their lease there. It's a great theater, but it's I don't think it's any flag they're flying for 35mm.
Wow.
They just refuse to pay to convert to digital.
All right, well, this is a big part of our
it.
conversation. Why film? Why, especially as a project, let's talk about not the shooting format so much right now. Let's talk about it as a projection format. Why film over digital? Why do you still think it's superior?
Well, I think that you have to talk about both simultaneously, really, because to me, digital, like anything digital, it's people get caught up in the convenience factor of it, and they sort of lose the quality factor of it. And digital is good enough for a lot of people. For me, when I see a movie shot digitally, I've never seen a movie ever that's shot digitally that I was blown away by the cinematography. Period.
Really?
Period. Never. Never. At all. There's ones that are like, yeah, it looks good. It's not going to be something that I think back on like, wow, what an amazing looking film, because to me, the depth of 35 millimeter, 70 millimeter photography is so much more immersive than what I see as a flatness, a sterile look to digital. It's just incomparable. And the same goes with projection.
Why do you think so many cinematographers are okay with that? Like, especially these older guys, like even the guy at Sorcerer. Why do you think they're so open to this change? Is it because they just see it as inevitable? Or
I think there's a few reasons. I think there's the inevitability because they need their job, and the studios saying this and that, and the studios in the bed. This is what's so ridiculous is people will spend $200 million on a movie like World War Z, and somewhere along the line they thought we'll save money, I guess, by shooting digitally. It's like you're spending $200 million on the movie.
Right.
Compromise on the way it effing looks, Right. But I guess to some people, I guess they don't have. Maybe they don't feel it's a compromise. I know some people like the looseness that comes with digital. Like you can kind of let a camera run, and it is.
Well, it's a storytelling choice.
Yeah.
Like I've seen some foreign films that totally suited that aesthetic, but they made it for the right choice. They didn't do it because it was the cheapest. It was like, this is something on the streets, nitty gritty.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Or you could shoot 16 millimeter, but
well, no, true. Because Battle of Algiers is one of the best of those kind of films, and that's shot on.
Yeah. I mean, I just think that, there's movies have gotten so much smaller as far as how we watch them. You edit them in a digital way on a little source monitor, and you watch it on your iPad or whatever. And there's not that many scenarios anymore where we see a movie in a really grand sort of viewing environment. Everything's a multiplex, and the screens are pretty small. And when you shoot digitally and you're like looking at your dailies, like, yeah, it looks good. But and digital and versus film shooting, it is harder to tell when you watch it on a television or something like that. But in a movie theater, to me, it's completely obvious, and it's not to be too deep, to dip too far into hyperbole, but it's stomach churning to me sometimes when I see digital photography, like something like After Earth, which was a movie I actually liked. I think I was also one of the only people that liked After Earth, but the digital photography was repulsive to me. I found it just repulsive. It made my skin crawl. And I wondered how much more I'd like that movie if it was just shot on 35 millimeter. There's no reason it needed to be shot digitally. It's not like I don't know if there's any reason anything really needs to be shot digitally. It's not like it's not.
Is that a time sensitive thing?
I think it's more it's quicker to work with. It also opens up the door for other options.
But here's the thing about it being quicker to work with. People who say that, I don't know how it really is quicker to work with. You load the camera and you shoot for 10 minutes and then you take a break. And at the end of the day, how much time you're still taking out a card, you're still, transcoding your card.
It takes the professionalism out a bit. It turns it into more of a like, hey, anyone could have done that to an extent.
Well, what I found with filmmaking since the digital revolution is I feel like there's less prep, and I feel like movies have gotten sloppier because there is that sort of we've got 5 cameras running, and we're not particularly burning money in a film sense. So there's just this sort of run and gun attitude. You've seen it a lot, this sort of like shaky handheld sort of thing that's come with the digital revolution, and it's not something I'm particularly fond of at all. So when shooting on film and you're budgeting for film and you got to get this in a 10-minute, 10 minutes is a lot of time to get a take, you know what I mean? But when people like Soderbergh's a real big advocate for digital, he couldn't have, there's that, what is it? Side by Side. He says he couldn't have shot Che with film. And I wonder why. Why does he think if digital didn't exist, he wouldn't have? Is it because he was in jungles? Does he think he's the first movie to ever shoot in a jungle?
Has he seen Sorcerer?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to quote someone who I once heard at a movie screening. And before we end this show, let's segue into our favorite movie going experiences.
Yeah.
Definitely the top 5 of mine, maybe number 2, was going to a little film called Sorcerer with William Friedkin in attendance, where he was quoted as saying the following: A film print is struck to die, just like you and me. In which the person I saw the movie with, sitting on my left, said, "Oh, I think you're full of shit, Mr. Freakin', and I'm going to pick a fight." And for the next hour, there was basically an on and off fight between William Freakin and this man right here, Mike Williamson.
Well, this is the problem with, some people, a lot humans are built, I think, to just drink the Kool-Aid. Whatever they're being told over and over again, they stop questioning it. And Friedkin, who's a great filmmaker, no question, had been convinced that digital is equal aesthetically to film when you're shooting, and it is more stable as an archival process. And both of those are not just they're factually incorrect. It's not even it's not a debate. You know, a film print. Anything organic, anything that you make, period, is going to die. But a film print, you know, there's a reason Metropolis can be seen now in a more complete version, is because there was some 16mm print laying around in someone's garage for 70, 80 years. And you're not going to find a hard drive sitting in someone's garage 100 years from now that's going to mount, period. You know, it's going to be gone. So what's going to happen is you're going to have these movies that are shot digitally and they're archived digitally. And instead of color fade isn't a problem anymore, but instead of like, oh, the negative is fading, let's color time it to get it back to where it's going to be, the movie is just gone. It just doesn't exist anymore, because when digital corrupts, it disappears. When film, quote unquote, freaking dies, it's repairable and it outlives humans, you know. So that was infuriating to me to have such a legendary filmmaker have been buying the Kool-Aid. Like, it used to be when digital projection came out and newspapers like in digital, as if it's a good thing, and be like, oh, that's terrible. You know, I'm absolutely not going to your screening, you know, but now it's unavoidable. But to me, it's ludicrous to me that you know, when you're shooting a movie and you're going to edit on your laptop and you have no money and it's going to go on YouTube, whatever, you know, of course, don't shoot it on film. But when you're a studio picture spending millions of dollars, it is mind blowing to me that you're going to go for lower image quality and lower archival stability, for kind of no reason at all. You know, it's like people think what's cheaper about it is up front. But post-production and archiving, it's way more expensive to shoot digital, because you got to go through this. Digital looks terrible in the raw. You know, you shoot a film negative, looks pretty good. And then you color time it photochemically and it looks a little better. But when you shoot digital, this is why digital films now, they're so contrasty, because there's no depth whatsoever. And you've got to crush those blacks so much to add any sort of depth. And you got to go through a big, expensive DI process to do that. So in post-production, it's way more expensive. And I was talking to the editor of
Hurt Locker,
and she had worked on Oz, the new Sam Raimi movie, which was shot digitally and it's archived digitally. And she was saying on a big movie like that, which has so much footage, that it costs the studio $10,000 a month to archive it from now until eternity, because when you shoot film, you put it in a can, you put it in a refrigerator room, and you come back 100 years later and it's still there. But you have to keep moving it from drive to drive to drive to drive to drive to drive so it doesn't corrupt. And she said that in order to cut down on those costs, they delete files that aren't used in the final film, which is essentially throwing away film negative.
Yeah.
You know, so this is what comes with digital photography, is you right off the bat, you've lost, you know, goodbye deleted scene for the Blu-ray, because they deleted it literally to save on archival costs.
Wow. Wait, how does this relate to horror?
Sam Raimi.
Well, I got Sam Raimi, but an interesting point was you had your debate with William Friedkin for an hour or whatever, and I heard the next night. I heard the next night there was a problem with the digital presentation of Exorcist.
Oh yeah, and he walked out of it. And that's not to say there's not problems with film presentations.
Yeah.
But
that's funny, I didn't know that.
But there is this sort of Kool-Aid drinking that digital is better. It's just better because it's newer. I mean, that's what humans always think. CDs are better than records because they're newer, and this company that made them and needs to make money off them told everybody it's better, it's better, it's better, it's better, it's better. But then down the line, CDs disappear and people say, you know, records sound better. The sound quality is infinitely more, you know. And that's
Mike's a big vinyl guy before anybody else that I knew out here.
Well, and we've seen this, we're talking about film production. We've seen this in the music industry too. There was Pro Tools. People record on Pro Tools. It's better. It's better. It's better. It's better. We don't have to pay for tape. We don't have to pay for tape. And then you listen to it, you're like, well, it sounds kind of flat, and the cymbals are clipping, and that's why a lot of, well, not a lot of, but like Jeff Tweedy and Wilco, and all these guys still record on tape because it is aesthetically more pleasing. It captures an audio, a sonic that can't be replicated through zeros and ones. And that's the same with filmmaking. It's zeros and ones, and it's always like a Pinocchio technology. It always will try to be a real boy, but it can't be. It's just impossible.
I like that as a quote. I got to say, though, I'm definitely a film purist to an extent. Not like you, but I still think they're all choices. Like, if there's an aesthetic reason to use something, I'd use it. But I wouldn't want it to be just budgetary.
Well, when it's VHS,
yeah. But I will say the DCP I saw that night afterwards of Cruising was better than if it had been a bad print. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Like, it was a very clean, beautiful looking film.
Well, sure.
It wasn't the same, though.
I'm not one of the guys that, there's a lot of film collectors that say, I'd rather watch a beat up, faded print than anything digital. I'm not like that. What I say is the best analog format is always going to be better than the best digital format. When you put the best of the best side by side, I'm going to go with analog because it's offering more visual information, more oral information.
Right. Mm-hmm. All I can say is thank God we're on a podcast nation called Geek Nation because only geeks would listen to
this conversation.
Awesomeness.
A couple of months ago, Fangoria actually went on the show Castle as an extra on the TV show Castle, and they still shoot film.
Well, a lot of TV shows shoot 16 millimeter. Walking Dead shoots
Breaking
16
Bad.
millimeter. Breaking Bad shoots 16 millimeter.
And
I was really, I was
great.
totally shocked when we got there. I was like, because since we were Fangoria, all the crew was immediately like, oh my gosh, you're Fangoria. And I was like, oh my gosh, let me see your camera. Mm-hmm. And when I saw, all these film cameras laying around and her cut print, I was like, whoa, this is crazy. So I had never been on a set that was using actual film because by the time I got to film school, that was something that was becoming antiquated. And once a year they would roll out the Steam back and teach us how to edit on it. And then they'd push it back into the... I did once. That was it. We saw it once.
The single greatest. I mean, also, one thing I totally agree with as a filmmaker is the tension that film celluloid can create. And I don't mean a bad tension. I mean a positive. Everyone focuses all their best effort.
It feels real.
It's real. And if you ever, and even though this is hardcore art house, The Sacrifice by Andrei Tarkovsky on the extra features, just watch that. You don't
have
to
watch
hardcore
art
The film
house.
ends with a house burning. And they have to get it in one take, and the camera's pulling back, and the film the first time it's on fire, and the camera gets a jam, and they're and they have to put out the fire, but it was okay. The house didn't burn down, and then the next take they pull it off, and it's one of the most stunning scenes ever recorded on film. But you're like, it's just. Everyone's got everything at stake in that. You know what I mean? And that's heightened.
I don't want to come off. I'm not anti-digital. I've shot digital plenty myself. I directed for 1,000 Ways to Die, and that was all digital. And there's really no reason to shoot something like that.
And all the stuff you do now is digital, right?
Yeah, I mean, when there's no, but when you're talking about a feature with a budget, to me, cinematography is absolutely as important as like an author's prose, and I think it's ludicrous to try and dumb that portion of it down when it's really not more expensive on a feature level. With if you got $1 million, I feel like you should be shooting film. It's.
Who are some of the directors who are holding fast on that? We know Chris Nolan is obviously one of the big ones.
Is still, not only does he still shoot film, he still cuts film. Like his editor is still on a flatbed.
That's
wow.
Cool.
And this is a brilliant filmmaker and who's had a brilliant career for 35 years now. I don't really feel like he's ever had sort of a low point. No. There's the popcorn point that everyone adores, but as a filmmaker, he's so much better than who we have now. He's still working. All these guys that grew up cutting on Avids and this sort of frenetic ADD sort of filmmaking that we have now, like Man of Steel. And it's funny, Man of Steel. That was actually shot 35 millimeter, and to me it was a terrible film. But there are still younger guys like Zack Snyder who appreciate and acknowledge the visual quality of 35 millimeter. Star Trek, both of those were shot on 35. That's why I'm excited about the new Star Wars movies, since those prequels were so digital. Mm-hmm. That the new ones are gonna be shot on film because he's a film fanatic too. So that's positive.
That's cool. Yeah. I know we're gonna get stuck in reps, so let's go around and like do our
favorite theatrical experience.
Theatrical experience. And I guess what could that mean? Anything?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I'm trying to think. I have a few off the top of my head that are horror related. I mentioned previously on the show that I used to, when I was like, I don't know, between 12 and 16, like I had nobody that would take me to rated R horror movies. So I would always wait outside the local theater, the Lawrence, the Lawrence Theater. And I'd wait for either a couple or an older, somebody that was older and be like, hey, can you just pretend that I'm your little brother and I'll pay for my own ticket? I won't even sit near you. I do that for everything. So I do remember the two that stick out of the top of my head is Leatherface, Texas Chainsaw 3, because I wanted to see that so badly. And I waited like 6 hours until somebody got me into that movie. And I loved it. I mean, I still have a soft spot for that movie. And the other one at the same theater was Tales from the Dark Side, the movie. Because I remember it was like me and one other friend, and we're like, there's no way that they were going to let us in. And then this like older dude showed up with his two kids, and we just struck up a conversation. We're like, hey, we don't mean to bug you, but do you think you can get us into this movie? And he's like, here's why I'll get you in. Because you know what? I love horror movies, but I love horror movies with a twist. So we like just chit chat with him, and he got us in, and usually we would sit away from them, but we sat next to him and his two kids. And because Tales from the Dark Side was set up as an anthology with tons of twists, literally at the end of every like 30 minutes when the skit was over, he would look at us and just go, twist.
That guy was a serious.
Yeah, but he was awesome. He was just like, I see the twist. So yeah, that was a lot of fun.
So cool. I love Lloyd.
yeah, that might have been Lloyd Kaufman. But no, he had two kids, so that's not. I don't think that's Lloyd.
Yeah,
but that's one that comes to mind. And I mean, I don't know about you guys, but like I had to take the bus to go see Exorcist 3, and like that was the local theater. But when I wanted to go like Exorcist 3, Jason Goes to Hell, those type of things, I'd take the bus and then wait and hope somebody would get me in. Mm-hmm. So yeah, Exorcist 3 was another great one.
That's cool. What about
you guys?
One of the best was probably the first time I saw Chainsaw Massacre. That was a midnight screening at the Dolby Theater in Austin, and I guess I was in high school, and yeah, it destroyed me. I wasn't, I don't know exactly what I was expecting. It was a classic horror film, but I found it to be so intense. I was just probably more disturbed, more affected by that than anything I'd ever seen. And then other Rocky Horror Picture Show was a big thing for me when I was like in junior high and high school, going to those at the North Cross Mall. They had the cast. I was in and it. Were you?
I used to be in it. Yeah. I was such a huge fan.
That was a really big thing. Like the first time I went to that was another one where I kind of didn't really know what it was, but I knew people were dressed up in the audience. I thought the audience was supposed to come dressed up like for Halloween. So me and my friend were like in Halloween costumes going to see the Rocky Horror Picture Show, not knowing it was thematic to the movie. So we were just like the two guys in like werewolf costumes or whatever. Rocky Horror Picture Show.
That's pretty funny.
And then other stuff, mostly movies that you love when you're a kid that you finally get to see on the big screen. Like I was in love with Gremlins, like I said, but my mom wouldn't let me see it. I didn't see it till HBO. And then when I moved to LA, I got to see it in 70 millimeter down in Westwood. So that was really awesome to like finally see this movie that was so important to me in 70 millimeter and stuff like that.
Yeah.
For me, I have to say, like, my most memorable is surprisingly Wayne's World. I know. I was saddest. I've watched Wayne's World more recently, and that is a shit film. It's just not funny now. It did not hold up.
Is this the Inside Broad comedy POV?
But when I first saw it, I was from a really small town, and we only had a drive-in for years and years and years.
Oh, so cool.
And we finally got a multiplex when I was in middle school. And Wayne's World was the first movie I saw there. And they had Wayne and Garth there. And of course, it was just like two crappy actors they paid to dress up like Wayne and Garth. But it was just so amazing to me to not be sitting in a car watching a film. And it was a huge deal. And just having Wayne and Garth, and I remember that my parents didn't want to come, of course, because it was Wayne's World. And so it was me and two of my friends at the time. And it was just the most amazing experience for me.
Is the drive-in still there?
It is.
Oh,
it is.
wow.
It's one of the few remaining drive-ins, but it is still there. They just converted to digital last year, and it was this huge deal because they couldn't afford to convert, but they couldn't afford to get the 35 millimeter prints anymore.
Yeah.
So the town actually fundraised to get them a digital system. So it means a lot to the town. But there's that one. I have to say, like, one of my favorite ones. God, all of mine are crap films. Beowulf, the new one.
Oh,
because I saw it. Yeah, I know it's not a good movie.
There's no haze of adolescence over that screen.
No, it's so.
That's very modern. I didn't expect that.
I know, but I saw it when I was in New York, and it was one of the first films. I was working at Fangoria at the time. I had been at Fangoria for maybe a year at that point, so it was one of the screenings I got to go to. But I saw it in IMAX 3D.
That's how I saw it,
and
too.
It was amazing. It was rather beautiful in IMAX 3D. There was so much of it that I was like, oh my gosh, that's rather, it was like a spectacle for me. The film was crap. I would never see it again because I can't see it in IMAX 3D
and
again.
you know, in IMAX 3D at that time, there were none of these fake IMAX theaters, so that would have been dual 70 millimeter projection of Beowulf.
It played it had to play at the New York City Natural History Museum because there was no other like IMAX theater in New York. So I saw it there. And I mean, they could have been showing me like my Aunt Tilly making pancakes, but looking like that, it was amazing. Amazing. Yeah. So it didn't have to be Beowulf. Just insert any other film title in that same scenario and I would have had the same thing. But more recently...
More recently than Beowulf. We were talking about nostalgic trips down memory lane. And suddenly it's like last week.
This is kind of my... 35 millimeter conversion because I had seen Suspiria so many times. I first saw it on VHS and then I saw it on DVD forever. It's always been one of my favorite horror films. And then last year, as part of the Italian Film Fest here in Los Angeles, they showed a 35 millimeter print.
Oh yeah, I was there for that.
And I went and saw it, and it was like watching a completely different movie. Like I saw things I have never seen before.
Was that the screening where they showed some Dracula footage before it?
Yeah.
Momentous.
And the whole audience laughed. And then they gave John Landis this thanks for being there award. Like he just came.
And we asked him why, and he goes, I don't know. Yeah. They invite me, I come.
Yeah. They invited him, and there was like, they were just like, he supports Italian cinema, and he was just up there smiling, holding his little award.
But there was a great Q&A with Dario where he was like, thank you.
Yeah.
That was it.
Yeah. So
that was a good screening.
But
it was a good screening.
I had seen Suspiria so many times that I could like point to the exact prop where the screen crops usually.
Yeah.
Or point, that person's not usually in the film. And just because I'd seen it so much, it seriously was like watching it, through a whole new lens.
That's amazing seeing an old movie because you just reminded me since we talked last week with Justin about the 35th anniversary of Halloween. There's like a big convention coming up.
Yep.
I came out for the 25th, and one of the big things they did in Pasadena was show the original Halloween in film. And I'd seen it a million times, but I didn't appreciate it until I saw it with an audience on the big screen. Film, everybody reacting to everything. And I always liked the movie, but like because I was younger, I tended to kind of gravitate more towards the sequels because I just grew up with those. But seeing a movie, something like Suspiria or Halloween again on the big screen, now you just understand. You get it.
Elric and I saw Possession a couple of, I think it was about a year ago. They showed it at Cinefamily, and if you could get over the horrible.
I've actually only seen that on VHS.
Yeah, I'd only seen it on VHS too, and I mean, like the copy I'd had, I still have it. It's so grainy and dark that you can't even really see the monster. And then when we saw that 35 millimeter print, I was like, well, that Rimbaldi kind of did a good job with that. I think he reused the same monster from Cameron's Closet and just kind of made it hump things, but it looked pretty good. So
I'll have to post on my Zalewski page about that. About those comments that I really don't agree with because I do run that. Just so you know.
He's like president of the Zalewski fan club.
I am a big fan.
He has the card in his wallet.
That is my favorite horror film of all time, actually. But my Ghostbusters first memory, remember it so well when the librarian turns into a monster. It just scared the absolute piss. I probably did piss myself. I was like a kid, and that film blew my mind. Interestingly enough, it's a trailer. Remember when you did those teaser trailers for FEARnet? I would go to 16 millimeter screenings at the local like Polytech in New Zealand. Every summer they would hold like every day for the kids. You'd come over and they'd screen prints of like Romancing the Stone, whatever. But they would play trailers first. And there was a trailer to something with a giant claw getting a woman who was sunbathing on the top. And I couldn't find the film for about 10 years. And
is that cute?
It ended up being cute, but I thought for the longest time it was one of the Amityville films, number 3D, I think, because it has a very similar thing, and I couldn't find it. I wanted that moment, but I don't think that moment exists. Even in Q, it's shot a little differently. So I'm pretty sure it's Q now, but it probably my adolescent, like 10-year-old was like, I must find that because the girl and she's wearing a bikini and there's this claw coming in. I'm the claw.
I think I have a 16 millimeter trailer of Q.
It's from the perspective of the claw. It's like the claw.
Yeah.
It's like the camera's right above the claw, so you're seeing the claw come towards her.
And that stuck with me as much as anything I've ever seen in any movie. That trailer stuck with me because it's pre-internet. You can't get answers. You had to be stuck with questions, and that's an amazing thing for a young mind. To fester on and wonder. You know,
I think it was you I was talking about with a couple of days ago, Rob. I was talking with somebody about how when we wanted to get really rare VHSs back, before internet, that we had to get these like mail order catalogs.
Oh, yeah.
And you would have to like find them in the back of like Fangoria or other horror magazines. And they would just be like these crappy Xerox catalogs, but you could get copies of these rare, like that's where I got all of my weird Japanese films from. Was like you couldn't find guinea pig at your local guinea pig store, at your local Blockbuster. You had to go through like this catalog to find it. It was a quest.
Yeah, right, crappy Xerox, but when that showed up in the mail, man, you were just like,
oh my gosh, I was Phantom Video.
What movies do I want? I would circle them and all.
Yeah.
Well, you bring up an interesting point in this pre-internet age. It's a pre-digital age where I think just across the board, you had to try harder to do things. And I think it kind of translates to filmmaking, and we see these spectacles like, Iron Man and Man of Steel and whatnot, where it feels like for the climax, was the director even on set? Because it's just a bunch of plates they shot and then, they animate over it for 15 minutes. And there is that thing about, when you're a kid, you're passionate about things because you're investing in it. And I think with the digital world we live in now, there is less passion for things because there is such a glut of availability of everything. You don't really have to invest yourself that much in it.
And the theme of the show is we're old and we're right.
We're old and we're right.
Do as we say. We're old.
Yeah.
There's definitely some truth to some of that. It's weird. I think it working for something. Yeah. We used to work hard for $1. Don't put
roller skates on your sneakers.
Well, you really
That's
believe in
just
something
wrong.
because you went after it because it was important to you. Yeah. But I feel like nowadays you might not realize what would be important to you because it's gone as quickly as it came. Yeah. There's something else that's sparkling in front of you.
Yeah. There's this weird thing about this generation now where they seem to not be able to.
I'm sorry, the show is just as. This generation. But you're right. You're right.
Where they just can't process information before 5 minutes ago.
That's true.
I posted
stupid kids.
Yeah. Damn you, Stephen. No, but like I went to the bank the other day and was wearing my Misery shirt, the Stephen King.
Oh, the
Kathy
new one
Bates
from Fright
movie.
Rags?
Yeah, I was wearing my
that
Kathy
shirt
Bates
kicks
shirt.
ass.
It's an awesome shirt.
New
I
shirt
go to the
from
bank.
Fright Rags. Check it out. It's beautiful.
There's 2 tellers there that are, fairly young, but not that young, two cute bank tellers. And they're like, I like your shirt. It's creepy. And I'm like, oh, yeah, what is it? And I'm like, it's Misery, the Stephen King movie. And they're like, oh, we've never heard of it. I've never seen it. I was like, never heard of Misery? It's a Stephen King thing. It's Kathy Bates. She won the Oscar. And they're like, who's Kathy Bates? And I'm like, man, Misery's not that old a movie.
Yeah.
She was in that Tyler Perry movie last year.
There you go. They probably would have known that. Yeah. But yeah, it's like one of my friends on Facebook, when I posted that, had pointed out, like, even when we were young, if we didn't, like, we at least recognize what happened in the 60s and 70s in music and film.
Yeah.
Like,
not only that, we were inspired by it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Like, we liked shit that was going on.
Was that just us, or was that the entire generation? I mean, is that why we pursued film and became what we became? Because we were influenced by these predecessors? Or was that everyone from our generation?
I think everyone, when I was a kid, what was on TV, you're watching, there's TV shows. We were watching Nick at Night. It was Mr. Ed.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, we were well aware of cultures of our parents.
If I stayed home
now
sick,
it's
like The Joy was bewitched.
Yeah,
and,
it's
I love
ancient
Lucy.
history, so it's not relevant, because there's so much content being generated.
Dave and I, today we had lunch at the counter in Los Angeles. We saw Andrew Cash there. And there was a girl in there who couldn't have been more than 16, and she was wearing a Nirvana shirt. And my husband, who was like a diehard Nirvana fan, was immediately like, oh my God, I can't believe that, the youth of today is wearing it. What's wrong with it? And I was like, Dave, it's exactly like when you would wear a Jimi Hendrix shirt when you were 16. The time frame is like completely the same.
But did he have a Jimi Hendrix record? Because he probably did, and she probably bought that at Target because she likes smiley faces. You know what I mean? That's the difference between the kids now, kids these days.
Kids these days. I just feel like we all need bedroom slippers and we need to be shaking our fists this whole time.
Damn kids.
Well,
So-
this brings me full circle back to what I watched this week. So last night I watched The Hunger Games. It took me
Whoa.
forever to get there. I didn't hate it. I don't know if I liked it, but I didn't hate it.
The Katniss.
I didn't see it.
It's on Netflix Instant now.
No.
But my big question, big question that Dave and I
like
kept
5
wondering,
minutes of it.
if they can create wolf-like holograms that can actually attack people and exist in the real world, why can't they just hologram food and end the hunger problem? It was just, has anybody even seen this movie here?
No.
You guys are looking at me with like these dead fish eyes.
I think there's weird digestion issues with holograms that sprung up in
It's
Sector
like the steak
C.
in Cronenberg's Fly. It just doesn't taste right.
Yeah. No, Hunger Games isn't terrible. I mean, the future stuff's terrible. The way they present the future, like the way it looks, like people with purple hair.
It's Technicolor.
Terrible.
It was
but
very Lady
the
Gaga.
actual story wasn't terrible. The story and her Katniss is beautiful.
Yeah.
I could watch her run all day. And I probably will after the show. 3 times.
Okay, guys.
Stamina.
So,
Yeah, do we have
news?
any news? Yeah, is there any news? Really?
No.
There's Comic-Con's coming up in 2 weeks. Viscera is next weekend. So we've all got some really major events going on here. There is a screening of At the World's End next Wednesday that I just emailed you guys about that I'm pretty psyched about. So with Comic-Con coming up, kind of all of the major industry news is stopping so it can shift to how the hell do we market ourselves to 200,000 people. So the big things that happened this week, Comic-Con wise, well, the one that I'm excited about, they are showing footage from the RoboCop remake at Comic-Con. And I got a press invite. I'm kind of excited.
No.
Not that I think it's going to be good, but I want to be there for it.
Sure.
I just
the guy that
watched
cast is good.
When
He's a
was
good
that
actor.
shot? When did they shoot the RoboCop? Wasn't it quite some time?
within the last year.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah. It's got a
That
great
movie's
cast. but-
Perfect. That movie's perfect.
Yeah, I just
it is.
Me and Mike were
That's
talking
really
about it before we started, but I just watched the first 2 RoboCops again. The first one is perfect, and I just forgot how ludicrous the tone was. Like the fact that it's like as brutally violent and gory, yet has like this sarcastic kind of funny tone to it, which you will never capture again, as evident by RoboCop 2, which I just
Except
right here.
in Starship Troopers, where they capture that tone perfectly.
This brings
Yeah,
me-
but that's Verhoeven.
Yeah.
That's
This
Verhoeven.
brings me to another weird news item of the week. And Elric, I think I talked about this with you this past weekend. So you know how the people who used to do Mystery Science Theater 3000, they now do these live events and they spoof movies. And you can go see them. They're through, I think it's Fathom Events, and you can go see them. Like they spoofed Birdemic, and they did Night of the Living Dead and things like that. And it's the spoofing
how do you
like
do
where
that?
they talk over top of it like they used to for MST3K.
Right.
So the next one that they are doing like that is Starship Troopers. And I'm so confused of how you would do that. How do you make fun
How
of a
you make fun of
movie
something
that's
that
already
iconic.
make
Jumped
fun of
the shark.
itself?
They jumped the shark. It's a
Yeah,
complete
it's already
masterpiece of
making
a
fun of
satire.
itself.
Yeah.
So
You can't make fun of satire.
Exactly.
Satire already
Yeah.
did that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
You know?
So I was really confused when I
It's
got the
crazy.
press release for that. You know, that just
Yeah.
when they do Birdemic, it makes sense because there's an innocence that they can pick apart with that.
Right.
But Starship Trooper was fully self-aware of everything that it was doing.
Yeah.
So,
Maybe they just don't realize it.
Yeah,
You know?
that's on them.
Yeah.
That's, the joke's on them on that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm anxious to see how that one will be received, especially because it's also a film that a lot of people rally around as, you know, it's a good film. No, it's a good film. So other news, come to Comic-Con, Fango booth. It's going to be awesome.
Yeah,
Rob will be there freaking out.
unfortunately.
It's his first Comic-Con. It's
Yeah.
so cute. It's like going
That's your
on his
first
first
Comic-Con?
date.
Yeah, I vowed never to go.
Yeah.
I went to the New York one, but that's not as crazy as
Oh
San
my gosh,
Diego.
you have no idea.
Oh, I did want to mention one thing, which is I can't tell you where I work right now, but I'm working in this place. This is interesting just because a show ended 2 weeks ago that was my favorite show of the year so far. I'm working on this floor, completely vacant. We're in this tiny little office. And then sometimes I see all these Hitchcock posters, like the biggest, and like we're talking like posters that probably about $4 or $5 grand each because they're like a whole wall and they look like they're vintage 1950, 1960. Every Hitchcock film framed in like $500 frames. And I'm looking at it going, wow, I wonder who's moving in this place. This is awesome. And this is like our next office along. And I am walking down the hallway and I turn around, and because of Geek Nation, I see the guest from Ryan Turk's show, the creator of Hannibal.
Oh.
And I turn around to him and go, dude, what? Hey, I saw you listen to your podcast with Ryan. I do a show on the same network. What are you doing? the writer's room is moving in that day
wow.
for season 2. And I'm literally the only other person on the floor with the writer's room of Hannibal. And he was so happy to talk to me. He was like, oh, I'm Brian Fuller. Yeah, good to me. And I'm thinking to myself, this is going to be, I'm just going to put my ear to the wall and be like, spoiler.
So wait, the writer's room of Hannibal can afford $5,000 just decorations?
They're all his.
Yeah, there's probably his personal ones.
He said he's been collecting for like 10 years Hitchcock posters, and he brings them to the writer's room. But there's about 8 people. I'm not going to tell you exactly, obviously, where it is and stuff. But it was really cool to me because I genuinely think that's one of the most cinematic shows I think I've seen in years.
Wow.
And it ended
cool.
amazingly.
I wonder if he has a copy of Psycho Legacy, and if not, maybe I'll
but it was really cool. It was cool to see somebody who actually loved something. He showed his care for it and was bringing it like to his writers and putting it on the wall for inspiration. And it wasn't Hannibal poster. Yeah. It's not Silence of the Lambs. It's Hitchcock.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
I saw Steven Spielberg at a grocery store this past weekend.
Nice.
He was buying peaches and mustard.
Why were you in Maine? That's awesome. I have a feeling that all the people you see at these places aren't the people. They're like bad Spielberg imitators and like weird people who look like Stephen King. Anyway.
No. This was him, I think.
Well,
I'll back it up with the I think.
We hope you've enjoyed hearing about these differences, the comparables. Of
Yes.
If you're ever in LA, come
differences,
to...
I basically just bludgeoned.
Yeah, bludgeoned. If you ever get to LA, come to one of the Secret 16s. It's a really cool event.
Yeah.
Last Sunday of every month.
And he has some really cool stuff coming up. I won't tell you what, but...
we got our own comic book superhero movie we're playing.
Yeah,
That's
so
exciting.
and a great print, right?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Is this after Comic-Con?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, last Sunday of the month.
Don't
Every
make
month.
me miss it. So.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks to Mike for having us.
Yeah. Thanks for
Thanks for hosting us,
having
Mike.
today. Thanks for hosting us.
And thanks to Geek
rants.
Nation and Brian for putting up with our ramblings.
Thanks, Brian.
I have to go to the bathroom.
Okay.
Me too. All right. See you next week, guys.
Bye, guys.
Bye.